Hey everybody, welcome back to the collective. We have a awesome show that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be communicating. We're going to be communicating about communication. That is the whole idea behind today. So, any thoughts on this? My phone just told me that I'm live. Good. I'm glad my phone knows. Does anybody have
As
any
does
thoughts?
the entire world, so let's go
That's the
live.
entire world. We're already live. It's just my phone decided that it was going to tell me, and then my watch told me, and now everything is telling me. So I think we're good. Any thoughts on communications? Before we even get into the conversation, I want to know any particular thoughts on the overall topic.
So can you get us going with some sort of direction on that?
Absolutely. So the reason I picked communication today is because we're all technically podcasters. Shaun, you are technically a podcaster.
I suppose you're right.
And I thought since we had 3 podcasters on here, we should talk about talking, because it's a skill set, and it is something that we have to develop and learn and trial and error, and how to hold a conversation and how to maintain the flow of things, and how to draw the best from your guest or from the person you're talking to, or how to draw the best from yourself while communicating. So I figured we'd talk about communicating. So what do you think was your biggest challenge initially getting into this game and creating your own communicative style? Let's start with that. How's that for a question?
I like that. I'll start. I don't mind.
Ever, man.
So I will say this, that first of all, you got to learn how to communicate to a person standing in front of you before you can learn how to communicate to the entire world. And even before that, you got to learn how to communicate with yourself. So I'll get right back to square one, and that's sometimes I think I'm funny, but I'm not. But that's just what's going on in my own head, Like I'm thinking of something, like as I'm talking and I'm saying something funny, I'm thinking, man, that was funny. That was really funny. I'm amusing myself right now. But the other person in front of me ain't getting it for whatever reason. Either they don't have the same sense of humor as I do. Maybe they're smarter than I am. It doesn't matter what it is. They just don't, the person in front of me doesn't get what I'm trying to put across. And it's at that point that you got to make a decision. Am I going to keep on with my sense of humor, or am I going to adjust to the person in front of me? So that took me quite a long time to figure out, because I thought I was a funny guy. But as it turns out, I'm not as funny as I thought. And so I had to start more boutiquely delivering whatever I was delivering, a form of communication with the person who was standing immediately in front of me. And so that took many years to figure that out. And that was super helpful, of course, to then begin learning how to do that through a digital domain, which is what I had to do when I was coaching all of my athletes for 15 years. They weren't standing in front of me. They were spread all over the world remotely. And so I had to learn how to communicate with them through emails and et cetera, digitally. And so once I learned that I'm not that funny and had to communicate with the person directly in front of me, and then I learned how to digitally communicate through 15 years of communicating with athletes, now I'm at a point where I've kind of learned those things, but it's an entire different kind of like phase 3 of communication for me, where now I'm communicating with an entire world. So I don't have anyone sitting in front of me that I can boutiquely deliver a message to. I'm not digitally communicating with a specific individual. I'm free flowing in front of the entire world, which is a totally different style of communication. And so what's really helpful for me in the sense of podcasting, we'll call it, is this format that we've got right now, because it's a hybridized model of you're communicating to the internet, of course, the world, but at the same time, I'm really just talking to 2 dudes who are interacting with me. And it's a nice hybridized model of, rather than just doing a one-way monologue, which I just finished doing over on my Instagram page, a live chat where I was talking about Operation Lemon Danish retrieval, talking about flying drones, talking about which hiking boots to use for rucking, talking about coffee, talking about whatever. But it's a one-way delivery that I was just free flowing, didn't have any ideas in mind. Some comments were coming through. I was having a few laughs. My cousin Brian he jumped on from Northern Ireland. He was teasing me a little bit. So it was fun conversation, but it's a one-way street kind of thing. You get a little bit of feedback, but really it's all you running the show, for lack of a better term. But this hybridized model, way better for me. And I think it's probably a way better approach for most people in respect to if they're considering getting into communicating with a larger group of people through this podcasting thing. This, I believe, is the way to do it. So here's what I'm going to conclude with in respect to communication. We all need to get better at it. It's a lifelong process, which I've been trying to do better every year. And if you're looking to get into communicating with a broader or larger group of people and you're considering podcasting, the first 10 are freaky. And so I don't think anyone should just run out, grab a microphone, a boom arm mic, a big podcasting setup and think, here we go. It's going to be a blast. It ain't going to be a blast. It's going to be a freak show. And so a good way to ease into this is hop on a hybridized platform like we're on right now. You want to dip your toe in the water? Come join us tomorrow or come join us next week. Hit up Chance Burrows with a DM or whatever and say, hey, buddy, I dig what you guys are doing. I'd like to try it. I've never done it. Would it be cool if I joined you guys next Tuesday? Done. And now you're sitting in. You can talk or not. You can just listen the entire time. We'll poke you. You'll have to talk a little bit, but you'll be able to dip your toes into a environment that is not going to be confrontational. It is going to ease you into the process of communicating with the entire world, because that's what we're doing. And you'll be supported. Like no one's going to make it difficult for you. And I know the first time that I went on a podcast, it was actually on Chance Burrows' podcast, Tools for the Toolbox. Shoot up those fireworks, buddy. That seems like 4 lifetimes ago.
A little while.
It's been a while. But, the idea being that first one, that was freaky for me. And every other podcast was pretty freaky. And doing live chats was pretty freaky. But now I've done it all so much, or it feels like it anyway. I don't even think about communicating anymore. This is so easy. But you got to put in the mad hours. You got to put in the time to make it feel like you're just communicating with another person who's standing in front of you, when in fact that other person is called the internet. So, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And in order to start it, it's best to find a way to get into it the easy way. And this is the easy way. Come hang out with us and dip your toes in the water. That's my opening thoughts.
Absolutely. Zach, you got any thoughts on all of that or any of that?
You know what? I think Shaun nailed it. But overall, I mean, I think about when I first started podcasting. Yeah, it's freaky. It is nerve-wracking, like Shaun said. Those first 10, for me, may have been first 30. And still till this day, it's nerve-wracking because you also don't know that person. I mean, Chance, you've come on the podcast. Shaun, you've come on the podcast. We hadn't physically looked at each other and communicated back and forth. So here we go. And let's see where this conversation goes. I do find it beautiful, though, that it is so organic. Oftentimes when we look at news anchors or journalists, it's very scripted. So the flaws, I think that's where the beauty is as well, for others to know that we're not all alone here, and we're humans. It doesn't matter what background we came from. I mean, you got a combat engineer, you got a tier 1 JTF2 individual, you got me that's in marketing communications, all different realms, yet we were able to do something together. And I think that's such a beautiful time period right now. Someone mentioned, if most communication is believed to be nonverbal, how do you overcome that in a virtual setting, such as podcasting?
Right there, yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, we always hear that, right? We always hear it. It's all the things in between the lines, how you feel of that person. But I think you can tune in digitally. I mean, it sounds sick to say, but you really can tune in, and you can kind of figure out a person if you're concentrating, if you're focused. I mean, if you're doing a bunch of other things and playing around, you're not going to be able to communicate well. But listening, I think that's an art that I've been able to learn and continue to learn.
Yeah.
Pause when you need to.
Oh, you're
Control
good
the
at it.
narrative. I mean, it can go left, right, all over the place, but can you keep it within the box?
Yeah, 100%. It's so true. I mean, and podcasting especially is one of the challenges is, you're talking to people, hey, you said it, you don't know those people. So it's a brand new conversation with a brand new person who you've never interacted with before. You don't know their body language. You don't know how they're going to react to your jokes. They might be from a completely different socioeconomic background. They might be from a completely different country. They might be like, there's all of these factors that play into how you communicate with that person. And it's challenging. And I think the key here, to answer the question, at least for Winterstorm, be authentic. That's really what it breaks down to, is be interested in what you're asking about and be authentically who you are. And that conversation will allow itself to happen. Don't try to be, the news anchor. Don't try to be something you're not. Chat. I mean, when I do my podcast with other veterans from other countries who have served in very different areas that I have, or served more or less or whatever, I'm just me. And I talk to them like I would talk to any other vet that I would talk to on the street. And that's it. And the communications, it flows more naturally. At least I find.
Yeah. I know some people that have scripts, and they'll write things where, they're saying, all right, Chance, here's the 20 questions I have for you. Here, Shaun, this is what I have. And you lose that touch. You lose that.
It's contrived.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's someone has already created the conversation before the conversation even started.
Yeah.
And they've already got an idea of how it's supposed to play out before the first word is spoken. And by the end of the podcast, or towards the end of the podcast, if how they visualized it playing out, it didn't unfold that way, towards the end of the podcast, you can see the tension in the individual, actually both individuals. And so when it's I'll call it a forced or a contrived or a manufactured or a constructed conversation that is non-organic, if you've been in the game long enough, you know that it's not an authentic conversation. There might be authentic points throughout the conversation, but if it doesn't have that flow, if it doesn't have that authenticity as it flows like water through the rivers of our life, if it's not authentic, then anyone who's a seasoned listener or observer of the human condition will be able to determine or interpret that there's just something off about this podcast. And the longer that you've been paying attention to podcasts, the more you can see the details of there's something off with this guy or this girl. And so what to the question that was up there just a few minutes ago, one of the things that distinguishes what we're doing from standard issue podcasts, and podcasts, I'm talking on an audio platform like Apple, Spotify, or Anchor as an example. Shameless plug, A Digital Pathfinder can be found on those 3 podcast platforms.
As can Canadian podcasts and Children's Watch.
Yes. I'm new to this. I'm just giving it a try. So one of the deltas or the differences between what we're doing right now and a standard issue podcast platform that's just audio is you can see how I'm speaking right now. You can see my eyes, you can see my body language, you can determine what I'm all about. And if you just tune in for one session, if you just tune into this particular episode that we're on right now, and you watch it for however long this goes on, you'll get a sense of the 3 of us just from one episode. You'll get a read on me, and you'll know when I'm smirking, you'll know when I've got a twinkle in my eye, you know when I'm teasing, you'll know when I'm super serious. You'll know all of these things if you pay attention to this visual medium that we're on right now. But if you don't form a trend within one episode, guess what? We're doing it tomorrow, and we're doing it just like this. And over the course of 10 episodes in 10 days, you'll know me.
Mhm.
You'll know my body language. You'll know my nonverbal cues. You'll be able to listen to me, but you'll be able to see two stories now. You'll see the verbal story and you'll see the nonverbal story,
Mhm.
because I'm not a freaking digital avatar, baby. I'm Shaun, and this is what I do, and I move like this. And once you know that, once you're used to that, once you get a read on me over a full week, we'll say, well, now there's no faking it. Now you're getting all the nonverbals with all of the verbals, and so I highly recommend this kind of a hybridized model where you get to interact with humans in this format, and on a consistent basis you can get a read on those humans, and then over time you can get a much better sense of how legit a person's words are in synchronicity with their nonverbal cues or their actual body language. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great point. And it's actually kind of humorous in that when people listen to your podcasts over time, I've had this brought up a number of times actually from some family and friends who listen to my podcast, and I'll see them in person and they'll be like, "Oh, it feels like I've just been talking to you for like the last 3 or 4 days because they've been listening to my podcast. So they've been listening to my voice talk about stuff to other people." And that's one of the neat parts about podcasting is that you get to it enters into your life a little bit, and that person, that the host or the guest or whatever it is, you get a piece of them. As Shaun was saying, you get a bit of a read, and the more often you do it, you get more of a read, and you start to pick up on that person's humor and that person's flow of things, and so on and so forth. And I really, that's why I love podcasting. I think it's such a great tool because we can develop that type of
Mhm.
interaction versus non. It, like with radio or TV where it was snippets and little, you got 2 minutes. What are your thoughts on this? And then like there's no way to actually understand who that person is or why they speak like that or think like that or do certain things. And actually, it kind of leads into another question by Winterstorm427, who, first off, if you're listening to this right now, so we should have you on the collective. So shoot
Yeah.
me an email, shoot me a DM. I got the links in the comments. Shoot me a link. We'll get you on here, and you can actually talk to us directly rather than having to do the comments. So,
Well, here's the thing. Winter Storm 427 may never show up as a real person, but they're already in the game. They're already
that's right.
part of our history.
100%.
They're a known entity in a sense. And the
Mhm.
only reason that we can have this precise conversation right now about Winter Storm 427 is because they've been in the game.
Yes.
They're engaged. They're as real a person as the three of us in a sense. We just
Mhm.
haven't seen their face to connect to it. And because the commentary and the engagement is real time, and it's obvious that that individual is aware, then they're now a real person in a real game with us. And I think that's great. That's a great aspect of podcasting, is particularly the way things are set up right now with StreamYard. We're getting live engagement with people who are
Oh, yeah.
thoughtful, and man, that's just an example of many people who are doing the same thing as they listen to this. So I dig podcasting for that reason.
Yeah. Before you jump in here, Zach, I'll let you finish in a second. I got another friend of mine that's going to jump in here in a second. I'm just going to have to the stream. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
How's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. You're a little quiet,
Fantastic.
but I think
This
you're
is
good.
awesome.
Chris is a former Green Beret, good buddy. Him and I had him on my podcast a little while ago. Super cool dude. He's now a coach, and there was something else you do too, right, Chris?
Primarily performance coaching right now. That's kind of where I'm putting all my eggs.
Right on. Awesome.
Nice.
Well, surprise. Hey, nice to meet you, pal. I got a quick question for you,
Yeah.
because I've been in the performance game myself for a little while, And I'm curious, what kind of performance coaching are you doing? Is it athletic? Is it blah, blah, blah? What is it?
Sure. I focus primarily on people that are kind of like, I guess, unsatisfied with where they are in life. And so I start out by asking them, all right, who do you want to be in 5 years? And then from that, I use that as their value system from which you can extrapolate all their goals. And then I get really specific and ask them to dream really big for their 5-year plan. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years? And then from my just being in the Army, we know how to backwards plan. Not everybody knows how to do that well. So I help them backwards plan and create a plan for the next 5 years, and I break it all the way down to the daily level. All right, what are the daily habits you need to engage in today to keep you on track to where you want to be, that aligns with who you want to be, and that's kind of where we go. So it's more mindset and goal setting than athletic performance. So.
I love that. So I've just got a follow-on question, and then I'll try not to drag us too deep off on a tangent. We'll get back to communication. So the follow-on question to you is, how do you determine their metrics, or how are you tracking them on the daily? Are they self-reporting? Are you use any sort of tools or what have you?
I'm pretty old school. I like the analog or even just regular Excel spreadsheet. But to answer your question, start off with the identity piece, the 5-year goals, and backwards plan. Once we have a plan for the daily of what they need to do to stay on track, I have them write down and keep track of their daily tasks and their completion rate on a weekly basis. And my thought is, as opposed to striving for 100% completion, shoot for that like 85%. And that gives you a little bit of grace that if you're not perfect every week, you can still chalk the week up to a win if you're hitting that 85%. And so after we've done the identity and the goal setting, it's just accountability after that. And they just check in with me weekly or monthly, however they want to set it up, in order to maintain that accountability and ensure that they're hitting that 85% execution rate.
I dig it. Thanks.
That's awesome. So Chris, I started off with a question to the other two here. Was what do you think I was talking about communication and podcasting and, developing rapport and relationships with people, but what do you think is the biggest challenge that you've had so far in terms of communicating, especially with your clients, because you're dealing with brand new people, you've no experience with them?
Sure.
What do you think has been the toughest part about that?
Good question. I think initially it's still kind of dealing with it is I'm kind of a self-proclaimed introvert. I get real shy around people, particularly meeting new people. And so my whole business now is meeting new people. And so some of that is just having to kind of get out of my own way and understand that helping others is important work, and being uncomfortable is an okay piece of that. So that's been my biggest struggle. But in regards to actually communicating with others, the technology we have nowadays, like with Zoom and all kinds of different FaceTime and whatever, it allows me to communicate with a much broader audience than I could have before. Like, none of my clients are in my state. All of them are all over the place. And so it's been nice being able to spread out that influence a little bit. And it's really just time management, adjusting for time zones and that type of thing. Technology has helped a great deal.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind adding something to that.
By all means.
So, Chris, the good news is you're going to do fantastic, and I'll say that, no joke. I know for sure you're going to do fantastic, and here's why. You wouldn't know this probably, but just not too long ago, I retired from 15 years of high performance race coaching athletes all over the world. And so, of course, I had to learn how to communicate digitally. I had to learn how to do all of this, that, and the other thing, all of the science of it, etc. I was told I was pretty good at it. I got some good results, yada, yada. So here's the thing, and here's why I know you're going to do great, is because when you popped up onto the screen there, and we weren't too long into it, because I am who I am, And because I've been doing it for a long time, I right away got involved with you, asking you questions, because I'm a curious dude. And I know you are as well. It doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert. It doesn't matter. You could not wear that beret that you were wearing unless you're a curious dude. And so you also have the ability to interact on a curious level all over the world with all kinds of different people. I mean, that was your job. And so you're going to crack it out of the park, whether you believe it or not, because you're already it. You've just got to figure out how to make it feel right to you, which took me a little while to figure out as well, by the way. But the moment that you kind of crack your own code, the moment that you kind of get real comfortable with crushing it, I mean, that's what I did, and crushed it at a pretty good level as well. But I know you will, because you've got all of the attributes, you've got all of the skill set, you've got the natural inclination, whether you believe it or not, to like smash whatever you want to smash in the sense of communication.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm off base, but that's what I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah. We just recently recorded, what was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we recorded on my podcast, and yeah, no problems communication whatsoever. I think we hit it right out of the park to begin with. So that's just, again, my view of my own podcast, but what can you say? So Zach, you had a point you were going to make before Chris jumped in. You want to finish that off, or?
Well, you know what? I think, Chris, first of all, thank you for joining. And yeah, like Shaun said, you're going to do well.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
When it comes to darkness, and it's a question for all of us, is like, why are we able to open up digitally through our darkness and, say to the world, people we don't know, we're not okay. We're not perfect. We're messed up. How are we able to do that and be okay with it? I mean, it is a scary thing to do. And as podcasters, I don't think we can just open up to everybody. It's certain people we jive with or connect with where we feel safe. But yet there's this world watching us. It's yin and a yang, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah. I can attest to that. I think I actually thought about this really deeply at one point. I believe it's the pseudo anonymity, in that other people don't know me, right? They see me on the screen, or they watch me on YouTube, or they listen to the podcast wherever, but they don't physically know me, right? They don't know me from prior to the podcast. They don't know me from the military or my childhood or anything like that, so they didn't see any of the development stages to get to where I am now. So I think it lends itself to a level of anonymity, in that it's not a personal connection. There's a semi-personal connection because we're talking and you get to know each other and so on and so forth. But I believe that's where it stems from. It makes it a little bit easier, right? Because live format, not so much, but when we're recording, let's say Chris and I were recording. At the end of it, Chris goes, you know what? I really didn't like that. Can we just delete it? And then it's gone from everywhere, right? Nobody ever saw it except for that one person that was recording with, but it's just gone. And I think that's why it makes it slightly easier, rather than sitting in a room, in a circle, sharing all your deepest, darkest secrets to the person next to you. That's a very physical and visceral type of communication. This lends itself to give some emotional space, I think. Those are my thoughts on it. Anybody else? Chris, you got a thought on it? Maybe Shaun? Anybody?
I think you're spot on in regards to the anonymity and the separation. It's not quite a mask because you can see my face, but there's a semblance of masking by being separated by the screens, and yeah, it allows for maybe some freedom to open up a little bit better, or in a different kind of way. Yeah, you're not sitting right next to me, and you're right. You don't really know my past. You weren't there when I was training. You weren't there when I woke up this morning and got my coffee. It's just, this is kind of our space right here. And some distance.
It's so true, though. I mean, people see a highlight reel of our life, right? We can go to the mountains, take a picture, but do you know what I did to get there? My tire was flat. All these things. We only show the good. That's why I think podcasting is beautiful. You can see somebody's story and give, like you said, it gives them time to talk. The news only gives you a little bit, and that's the soundbite, and they'll pick what they want to pick, right? So,
yeah. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of disagree with you guys.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not pushing back. I'm not saying that you're wrong, because you're right. You're right in your world, but it's different than in my world. At least it's different in my brain anyway. So I think this. I absolutely don't feel any anonymity. Zero. In fact, quite the opposite. I feel extremely exposed. And so the reason I say that is because enough people know me. Not like a lot. Maybe there's 12 people in the world that know me, whatever, pick a random number. But enough in my brain, enough people know me that when I jump in front of this live, which I've been doing for some time now, like there's a lot of people who know me, man, in my head. And I'm trying to be careful for two reasons. One, they know me well enough that they'll know when I'm not acting out, but I'm off base, or I'm not being who I am. And so that holds me accountable. Like, even if I wanted to be something that I'm not, I couldn't, because too many people know me. So they'd know I was, faking it or whatever. And so I just stay true to who I am. So I believe that I don't have any anonymity. And the second part that I feel is at least interesting to me is whatever I'm saying, whatever I'm doing, how I'm approaching things, I'm approaching it authentically, of course, but I just know that I've got to do it as best as I can for all of the people that I actually don't know, like the rest of the world that doesn't know me. Like, there's 12 people who know me, and then there's 8 billion people who don't. And so I'm trying to I'm never manufactured, but I'm trying to represent in a way that's just a little more elevated than what I would do if I was putting my muddy boots up on a table with a couple of buddies and jawing about whatever, all of the world's problems. And that's an entirely different form of communicating than the one that I'm doing right now. Because with those dudes that I know that we can talk about anything and talk about it in any fashion that we want, we're really well synchronized. But for the rest of the world, they're not synchronized with me. So I have to kind of elevate my game, knowing that there's fresh eyeballs on this conversation that are evaluating me right now as the village idiot or someone who can hold a sentence together. So it elevates my game rather than diminishes it through thinking I've got some anonymity. And now maybe I'm off base, maybe, I've got it twisted or whatever, but I feel way more accountability because I feel like there's way more eyeballs on me versus, I've got anonymity. I just don't feel that.
But that's the thing. It's like, how do you know what's authentic? Because back then, we were so different, right? Well, not so different, but you learn, you grow. I mean,
oh yeah, for sure.
Since I met you guys, I've grown, and that's why, again, you kind of rogue in a way where I'm kind of understanding myself a little more, taking that time to say, who am I? What's my purpose? What's my mission? What do I want to do here? Time is all we have. Energy is all we have. So where do we apply it, right? And things like this, it's important. But the authentic voice changes over time. I mean, you asked me when I was 18, 20, perspective was so different on life. You asked me 2 years ago, it was different, right? So how do we evolve? But the person that knew me 2 years prior would say, well, he's not being authentic. But then if you look at all my podcasts, you can see, again, when we look at body language, we can look at voice, we can look at tone. Give or take, it's been the same. I mean, so am I being authentic? I mean, over close to 200 people I've talked to. Is that being authentic? I don't know. What's your guys' thoughts there?
I think authenticity comes in. It will change. I mean, well, your authentic self won't change. You are yourself, but the way in which you show your authenticity will change as you grow and mature and learn and change, because I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm sure we're all the same in that.
Dude, you're not the same person that you were a month ago.
Exactly.
That is so true, by the way. And same with you, Shaun.
Oh, I know.
Holy.
But the key point in that is that I'm still myself. And as long as I'm true to myself as I change, that will be visible. And as you said, you can see it in the podcast. You can see it in the conversations that I have. You can see the growth in the development of all these things.
But you're
Anybody else
proud
want-
of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think that's the point is, we're talking about communication, and we're talking about it in the sense of the physical act of how to communicate with another person or communicate with the world. And all of us, as we're having this thought, we're all thinking like outward. We're all thinking like, how do I communicate?
Good point.
But there's the other aspect of how am I communicating with myself in this precise moment that I'm trying to communicate with that. And so, I've seen, certainly I can't speak for myself, but I think I've improved. But I know that Zak has certainly improved his style since I've come to know him. And of course, Chance, I can say the same thing because I've seen it myself. And so, it's easy to see the external metrics of someone improving their performance, but it's not too common for a person to just like not move outside of themselves to evaluate or yardstick. They just don't do it inside as often as they do it externally. And so communication should be kind of starting within ourselves, like, who am I today? What am I trying to say today? What is even going on today? Who am I right now? That sort of internal communication can help set your own sense of how to communicate externally. Because if you wake up and you're crusty, man, you got to know that, so that when you go to communicate externally, you can offset that somehow. I mean, you got to be aware of who you are in order to be aware with the person who's in front of you.
Yeah.
Chris, it's funny though. I had one shift in a morning where it just changed everything. It was a couple days ago. I woke up and I was happy all of a sudden. And throughout that morning, I was smiling, making my coffee. I was doing things that were exciting. And again, it's not to the world, but it's to myself. Leading up to every day I was waking up, and your mind can play games with you, and it can take you into dark places and weird places. You're not worthy. You suck. So how do you get out of it? And all of a sudden, I woke up and I was so happy. And I don't know, the way I was communicating with others, the way I was flowing with others, just it shifts everything, doesn't it? Has that happened to you guys where it can just change in an instant?
Yeah. Chris, what do you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think beginning with communication with self is super important. And I use this analogy all the time, so much so that I'm getting tired of it. But when you're in an airplane and the flight attendant is doing a safety brief, and they say, if the oxygen mask come down, yours on first, and then help others. That's how I kind of view some of this. Begin the day by communicating with yourself well, so you're in a proper mindset and a proper state of being to better communicate with others, or at least be self-aware of how you're communicating. So maybe you can adjust and be more tactful when appropriate. I think it's spot on. Begin the day with communicating with yourself well, and truthfully. That's my thought.
Yeah, great thought, Shaun.
Just to not to build off, but your comment about the oxygen mask coming down the plane, and your first responsibility is to kind of put your own oxygen mask on in order to help the others around you. I used to think that as well, but I actually refined it. I refined it a little bit more in my own head. I mean, I'm not saying that anyone's doing it better or worse than me. I'm just saying this is how my brain works. I take that same example or that same story, except I make myself the pilot of the plane. And so the moment that the incident occurs that requires oxygen or what have you, now I'm the freaking pilot. And I'm going to for sure get that oxygen mask on so that I can then look after everyone in the plane behind me, rather than thinking of myself as a passenger on the plane and just simply handing an oxygen mask off to someone else that's sitting next to me once I've got mine on. I try to like elevate myself mentally into a position, not of authority, but of command and control, or of care of the people who are in the plane behind me. So it's just an added layer, which is just it's an intellectual layer. It doesn't even exist. It's not tangible. I can't reach out and poke it. It's a mindset shift that seems super minor, but to me, it makes all the difference in the world of considering myself as the pilot of the plane who needs to put on that oxygen mask to care for the people in the tube behind me. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I do have a follow-on question from something that we were talking about a little bit earlier from Winter Storm. And I kind of want to get into this because I think it's a really great question. Is what is something that you feel you will never be able to communicate digitally, and something that is much easier to communicate digitally? Because those are two very distinct things that I think we all need to come to grips with eventually when dealing with this particular medium. Because
a hug.
a hug, that's a great one. But yeah, any development on that, Zach, other than just a hug?
You know what? Let me think on that question for a second.
Okay.
I'll pass that on along.
Okay. Chris, you want to take a stab at it?
I think when communicating digitally, as opposed to sitting across the table from somebody, there is a little bit of language lost with the lack of proximity to body language. You might not be able to see me fidgeting uncomfortably under the table.
Oh, we can see it.
Yeah.
So I think in some regards, I heard a statistic. I can't remember if this is accurate or not, but I think it's 7% of language is verbal, 38% is in your tone of voice, and then 55% is body language. So we are missing out on like a pretty significant portion of language and communication when we are forced to do this digitally. And even some of the clients I work with are real uncomfortable with having the video on, and so I lose even the little bit of body language I could see with their video on. So it's just tone of voice and just verbal. So that's one thing I think we lose digitally. But also the advantages of digital are, as we're talking like this, I could send you links to resources or books or whatever, and you have them immediately, as opposed to me having to remember to get back to you if we're like one-on-one, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Shaun, you got any points on this one?
Yeah, I do. What is something that you feel you will never be able to communicate digitally? This is an easy answer for me. My handshake. Hey, listen, I'm when I shake your hand, you'll know. And why you'll know me much better through a handshake is because not only am I standing in front of you, we're now energetically connected. And we talked about this the other day, how you can quantumly entangle someone. When it was just yesterday when we were talking with Travis Bader about artificial intelligence, GPT 3.5, 4.0, et cetera, and how my intention some time ago was to quantumly entangle all my friends and start planting little quantum entanglement seeds in their peanuts so that, yada, 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 all of that good stuff. Are we in the simulation? Are we not? Et cetera, whatever. And so I can quantumly entangle with someone digitally, but when I handshake with someone, it's entirely different. And so it's easy to entangle someone digitally, but it's not easy for them to feel my presence. And when I'm standing in front of someone, I don't have to talk. If they're tuning in, they'll feel what I'm about. They'll know who I am without a word spoken. And that's just, not everyone can do that. I mean, not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can come up next to me, stand next to me, and feel what I'm about. But anyone who cares, or anyone who's been in the game a little while, I mean, any Green Beret in the world would be able to get a sense of who I am just by standing next to me. And so I don't have to talk. I just got to shake your hand. And that's what's almost impossible to put across in a digital communication. However, I will say this. It doesn't mean that the gap can't be closed between a pure digital email a connection, just email after email after email, and they've never seen my face. That digital communication gap can be closed towards the handshake by doing this sort of thing consistently, by being present every day, by making yourself visible every day, by someone starting to form a trend on who you are every day, so that over the period of 10 days or whatever the case is, they can get a better sense of who I am. They may never shake my hand, but in 10 days, they're kind of getting visual handshakes, so that instead of just a sterile email, now at least I've kind of taken my hand out and done the handshake digitally over a period of time. I hope that makes sense.
I know you nailed it. And I think the other thing is context. When we read something versus when we see the person say it, there's a difference. So I could read something where it says hi, period. And I could take it as that person maybe is not interested in the conversation with me or whatnot. But that person could just be saying hi, right? It's just how we perceive things and what's going on in our own minds. The handshake, though, that's an interesting one. Now, is it a firm handshake? Is that what you're looking for, Shaun, when you say what you're looking for from someone? Or is it eye contact? What are you looking for when you shake someone's hand?
Even as I'm approaching them, I mean, in order to do a proper handshake, you've got to be approaching someone. I mean, you're walking towards them to shake that hand. And so even if someone's behind me and they tap me on the shoulder, which, by the way, isn't a great idea because I don't respond well to that. Everyone knows that. Anyone who knows me knows to not sneak up behind me and tap me on the shoulder. They come around me on the flank, wide bank, come in front of me and, hey, Shaun, how you doing? I mean, it's not that I'm a freak. It's just that I don't like being tapped on the back like an ambush. So if you're coming towards me to shake my hand, already I know what's up. I'm getting a read on you. I'm feeling you out before we actually connect. And so it's not that I'm looking a person in the eyes or looking at their hips or tracking their hands or seeing if they've got this, that, or the other thing. Like, I'm just feeling them. I don't need to look at their left ear. I just feel them as they're coming towards me. And as we reach out to do the handshake, I've already got a read on the person. But the moment that I connect, I only need I need split seconds to get a sense of the dude in front of me that I'm shaking a hand. And I might not have it all figured out. To get it all figured out, whatever that means, it might take me days. But I'll tell you what, I get a real good read the moment that I connect with the dude and look him in the eye and think, okay, I dig this guy. So I'm not looking for anything particular, Zach, to your question. What I am doing is I'm emptying my mind, not looking for anything, and seeing what I feel. For me, it's about the instinct of the moment. And sometimes that takes a lot of experience. Sometimes that requires you to be zen. Sometimes it requires you to just not show up with a predetermined outcome. It just requires you to be a cool dude with an open mind and a good heart and a solid handshake, and then see where it goes from there. At least that's how I run it.
It's very similar when we linked up at Pegasus Jump for the first time, and
for sure, buddy.
Shaun and I had been talking online for a while, quite close to a year. 6 months maybe, something like that.
Yeah, 3
anyway,
quarters a year.
Yeah, and we were chit-chatting all the time, messaging back and forth on Instagram, all that good stuff. And then the actual instant that he saw me and I saw him across the open space at Pegasus Jump, and he was just like hey, and there was a feeling as you walk up, and then the handshake and the smiling, hey, how's it going? Nice to finally actually see you. But there is a very innate feeling of
Mhm.
actually shaking someone's hand, of actually physically being there. And I have this great story from back at the regiment where we were having issues with people communicating across the hallways from each other in the offices. And I'm sure you guys, I know Chris and Shaun, you guys know what it's like to be in the units where you have the head shed and they're just in offices emailing each other left, right, and center. And there was lots of miscommunications and stuff wasn't getting done. And the RSM finally brought us all out. And we were there on a regimental parade with the entire regiment laid out. And he goes, okay, listen, you people work 15 feet away from each other. Step out of your office and talk to one another, right? Don't just email back and forth and no, because things get lost and things get missed. And, Tim just put up this comment here. The problem with email is the receiver's mood will dictate how they perceive the intent of the message, which is it's very true. And how you use punctuation and or whether you use punctuation or not, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's nothing like physically being in front of someone to communicate what it is you need to communicate. I don't think anything will replace that. Any further thoughts on communication? Anybody? Chris
Yeah.
or Shaun?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tim's right on the money. You're right on the money. And I'll tell you what, I've had guys communicate with me in the past that because they think they can speak to me that way, they do. But they would never speak to me that way if they were standing in front of me on the sidewalk, ever. And maybe it's because they get their ass kicked, or maybe it's because they get a tongue lashing, or whatever it is. I mean, they just wouldn't communicate with me in as forceful a manner or as ignorant a manner or as in disrespectful manner. I mean, I don't get emails like that. I mean, rarely ever in my life have I ever got a level of disrespect where I've thought, dude, I'm heading over to your house right now and you're going to get it. So that's just not how my life runs. But there is a thing out there where a lot of people feel that they can say anything they want through the anonymity of comments or emails or whatever, DMs or I don't know. I just don't get that sort of stuff mostly. But I know it's a thing out there. And the reason it's a thing is because people aren't being held accountable in a real one-on-one setting. And so they feel like they got a get out of jail free card on the regular. And I just don't think that that's right. So I will always hold someone accountable, even if it's not directed at me, if it's directed at a friend or an acquaintance or an associate or a random person that I've only met once. If they're getting grief from someone who has, is a moron, then I'm going to step up and I'm going to not maybe sort it out, but I'm going to throw my piece into the pile of, hey, bro, shut up. You're an idiot. And I'm not going to say it mean unless I have to say it mean. But I'll enter in, well, since we're on communication, I'll enter into the process of communicating with the village idiot in a way that hopefully he can take ownership of his own stupidity. But if it comes right down to it, that through a number of layers of attempts, I can't get that individual to realize that he is the village idiot, eventually it'll come to this. Dude, you're an idiot. Sort yourself out. And if you need help, here's what you need to look into, ...
Yeah.
And so, I think communication is something that isn't just we're responsible to try to, do positive things out in the world and et cetera, et cetera. We're also responsible to keep the village idiots in check as well, to some degree.
Yeah, couldn't agree. Couldn't agree more. Chris, you got to head out pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything burning in the back of your head that you want to share with the world?
Yeah. So my social media has been interesting lately. I have no desire to be like an influencer or anything, but a couple of like my TikToks and Instagrams have blown up and it's grown my audience, which really just lent itself to being exposed to and engaging with a greater cross section of the populace in general, which leads to trolls and people being jerks. And coming from a community where unspokenly, it's like real friends stab you in the face. If they have a problem with you, they bring it to your face. They don't talk about you behind your back. And so when you get, or at least when I had experienced some like negative comments or belligerence on social media, my first reaction was kind of coming from that same place. It was like, oh, I must be fucked up because somebody's just brought something to my attention. And I had to take a step back and realize that that's not always the case. And sometimes people are just jerks because they want to be jerks. And so I had to put my filter on and understand that they're not. Sometimes people aren't trying to correct me. Sometimes they're just trying to be obnoxious. And as a result, I've let go of a lot of that, and it's caused a lot less stress.
That's a great point.
Congratulations.
I got you. There. Go ahead.
Oh, how do you know when to not entertain individuals? They want the attention. Maybe they're not getting the love they need at home or within themselves. So how do you just ignore it? But again, ignoring them sometimes gets worse, right? I mean, Shaun, we had someone on YouTube on the Canadian podcast talking about, oh, you're not this, you're not that. Well,
yeah, dude, that was crazy. I mean, so you wouldn't know the background, Chris, but I mean, this is how crazy the world is. And I'm freaking wearing my 2 Commando t-shirt right now because I was part of 2 Commando for about 4 years. And so some village idiot who claimed that he was in the airborne regiment hopped on with a comment saying, there's no way I could have been in 2 Commando because he didn't know me. What? If you didn't know me, it's probably because I didn't punch you out, which I should have done back in the day.
But you know what? Why not private message?
It's crazy that someone would jump in out of the blue and say like moronic things to try to whatever. I don't know why someone would be that ignorant, but how I chose to deal with that is not say, dude, give me your address. I'm coming over there right now and we're going to get at it. I didn't say that. All I did say was, here's the facts. And I stated the facts of the years that I served, who I served with 2 Commando, Pathfinder 2, and this, that, the other thing, whatever. And it was just factual, as any dude would do in towards the tip of the spear. If you got something to say to me, say it in front of me. If you want to stab me, it better not be in the back. It better be in my face. And before you take that swing, you're going to get it. So I think that there's a way to deal with trolls, and you don't have to be, or I didn't have to be confrontational. I was just factual.
Well, I've entertained trolls before, and you can be polite back and they'll just go at you again. They'll go at you again. At that point, you just gotta step back and say, you're an idiot. But not say it publicly, but just, I don't want to entertain that stuff. That's that energy that you didn't do what you're doing to serve that energy, right? Chris, you didn't do what you do to deal with that, did you?
Exactly. I've gotten to the point where I can start to differentiate between people that have served and been part of special units, and they're asking actual questions like, "Hey, are you really who you say you are?" I'll respect that, and I'll be like, "Yep, these are my dates, these are the guys I served with, etc." Versus a troll who I have nothing to prove to, and understanding that I don't have to prove anything to anybody, but particularly somebody that never served, particularly to somebody that's just being obnoxious. And so it can come down to, if he wants to call me all kinds of names or fraud or phony or stolen valor or whatever, that's irritating, but I also don't have to entertain it. And I don't have to play that game. I'm not going to play by their rules if they're going to start doing that. Some people I just have to ignore. But again, some others I will entertain because I think they're coming from a place of like ensuring I'm not just some dude claiming to be a GB.
Yeah.
You could have bought that beret. I mean, that beret that's just on the shelf there, you could have bought that.
Exactly.
Yeah, technically. So I just, first off, we're going to wrap up here real quick, but I can't thank you both, all you guys enough for being on here. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate both Zach and Chris for jumping on here. This has been awesome. I think there's lots of great points in here. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Anything on communication or finding people's addresses and going to show them who's boss, that kind of stuff? Any final thoughts?
Don't be a Frank Gervais.
There you go. Don't be that guy. Chris, you got any final thoughts?
No, just the importance of that nonverbal portion of communication. I have to remind myself that I lose some of that digitally. And so just offer a little bit more grace when talking to people.
For sure.
That's a great point. Shaun, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, just try to do it better than I do it. And in order to do that, you've just got to be more thoughtful about who you're presenting to and the message that you're trying to get across. And by message, I mean the thoughts that you have are not the only point of the conversation. The message that you're trying to get across is an interactive message that will organically morph itself several minutes from now. So if you're trying to communicate, do your best, but don't go into it with a preconceived outcome.
And I got to say, in 1941, the SAS said something, who dares wins. So just keep pushing forward.
That is the way. If any of you want to get a hold of us, if anybody wants to get onto the collective, we have it right here. Send us an email, hit us up on the IG. And if you want to learn how to communicate, you want to you want to build your communication skills, or perhaps even grow your network, you can do that here on the collective with all of us. And we'll talk to you next tomorrow. Have a good day, y'all.
Thanks for joining, Chris.